Racing through the cobblestone streets of Kachar isn't my favorite way to start a summer's morning as hot as this one. I'd rather be lying on feather-soft green grass in the royal gardens by a quietly bubbling spring. But fate was never on my side. It shouldn't surprise me that fate had once again led me to this life. I intended to use my last garlands to gain entrance to Mrs. Turbley's home for disadvantaged boys. Instead, I had bet wrong on a game of Queen's Cross playing in the streets. My father would no doubt disapprove from wherever he was now. I had spent the last week's mornings viewing two teams play the often rough game of Queen's Cross. Though my father banned me from playing the sport at one point, I could recall fond memories of the game. It certainly wasn't because I was leading a life of leisure. I had often won the game and thought I could make more garlands based on my experiences. I had placed my bet on the squad who showed their impressive skills the past few days. Unfortunately, their best player was taken in the middle of the game by an angry woman with a baby on her hip. My hopes and heart sank as the other team captured the opposing team's queen. This bet would cost me the rest of my coins. The devils were no doubt laughing at me for the predicament I now found myself in. I quickly turned down a dirt alley behind a row of rundown shops, but stumbled on a loose stone. A rough hand grabbed my torn shirt and an audible rip echoed around us. The next sensation was being thrown into the awfully solid brick alley wall. The next was being spun around into his uncommonly dense frame. "Where's my payment, street scum?" The captain of the winning team spat, leaning close and gripping my shirt front. I gulped, wiping spit off my cheek. "What payment? Do I know you? Perhaps you've drunk too much ale at the Dark Mule." "Oh, that's rich. You've got a pompous tilt to your head and a smug attitude that won't buy you friends in these parts. Honestly, you can't be much more than 10 years old." I wasn't. Lucky for me, I'm not looking for companions, and you may think of an insult that I haven't heard so often. Looking through my long, light brown hair, my eyes darted around the alley, looking for an escape. I had chosen poorly yet again, as the alley ended with a brick wall. "The payment," the thug demanded again, and drew the knife he had tucked into his boot. While it wasn't the finest knife I've ever seen, it was certainly sharp. I felt the edge of the blade against my throat. There have been numerous times, especially in the last 4 months, where I should have stayed quiet and I didn't. A few fresh scars served as a reminder. This time I made the right decision. I set my jaw forward and handed him the remainder of the garlands I had in a pouch in my pocket, hoping he wouldn't notice my trembling fingers. Licking his lips, the man gave the pouch a little shake and tucked it away. He gave me an elaborate bow and said, "Stay away from our games. You obviously don't know how to survive in Kachar." I couldn't deny that, so I kept quiet. He sauntered away from me, no doubt pleased he had his payment. I followed him at a distance into the bustling marketplace, coming to life under the beating sun. Like the Queen's Cross games, I had spent time observing the humming exchange of goods, services, and garlands at Kachar's marketplace. My eyes followed the captain, who so smugly carried my coins. He was slowing through the crowded streets to talk to his fellow gangsters, with thoughts of me, the street ragamuffin, falling by the wayside. I had no intent of allowing him to make off with the rest of my inheritance. He moved along to another stall. I crept as close as I dared to where he was conversing with a charming shopkeep over her wares of pottery. He was taking an excessive interest in the cups and saucers, while I bumped into him from behind, rattling the ceramics. While he smiled apologetically at the vendor, I used his wavering focus to snag my pouch of garlands. Dashing between servants and town people alike, I scampered off, putting as much distance as possible between us. On my way out of the lively goods sector, I made one other quick stop. A fabric distributor was deep in conversation with a man who appeared to be a sailor, no doubt seeking some sort of trade agreement. "You've been gone far longer than I expected, Hector. My clients demand crimson for their capes to match the royal families. Does this look crimson to you?" barked the owner. Hector, I presumed, nodded quickly. "Yes, it's red." "No!" The owner slapped his hand on a small jar. "This is cardinal, not crimson. You are gone a week past delivery and returned with the wrong shade." Hector fumbled for an excuse, and I used the opportunity to snag some unattended ribbons on the fabric-covered table. I stuffed them into my pockets next to an ordinary rock I always keep on me and continued on my path. Mrs. Turbley's home for disadvantaged boys lay on the far edge of town. Upon looking at its faded facade, a feeling of finality settled into my bones. This was it. No more formal life, No second chances. Saints knew I needed more than second chances, more like fourth or fifth chances, depending on whom you consulted. I took a shuddering breath and opened the wooden door with a creak. The inside of the building couldn't have been more than 20 strides in length, yet it held what appeared to be 50 boys of varying ages. I had come in at a mealtime, which was a time I had hoped would work to my advantage. I should have realized that food doesn't stay long around hungry youths. A faint aroma of cooked potatoes lingered in the air as I cautiously stepped through the crowd. A fair-haired child sat alone, backed into a corner. The way his eyes darted around the vicinity was like a mirror, as I imagined I looked much the same. This boy needs an ally, I thought. "What's your name, Squirt?" I quipped in my Avenian accent. "Baxley. I mean Bax," he stammered, adopting a voice I imagined he believed made him sound older than he was. I used my best formal smile and questioned, "Where is the matron of this fine establishment?" "Matron?" "You know, the lady of the house." "Ain't no ladies around here." I huffed loudly. "Mrs. Turbley? Is she in?" In response, Bax pointed toward a doorway behind a long serving table. "She usually washes the dishes out back after lunch." "Much appreciated, Bax." I smiled. I rolled a garland over my knuckles and flipped it to him. "I could use a good inside man like you." Bax caught the coin in disbelief. The boy couldn't have been more than 6 years, but had the eyes of a much older person. He looked like he could use a friend and possibly could teach me how to handle this place. As my newly acquainted friend from this morning said, I didn't know how to survive in Kachar. I meandered to the back of the dining area, dodging boys snapping a wet cloth at each other as they haphazardly wiped the tables. There was a clear hierarchy at work here, which I made a mental note to unravel later. A woman no taller than I was at the back of the kitchen, dumping dirty dishwater onto some plants. She had dark hair tied back with a filthy red handkerchief. Her body was that of a working woman, stout, sturdy, and stern. I envisioned her personality would match her build to be the house mother of this lot. "Is that a crimson handkerchief? I hear they're all the rage in Drilliad," I pathetically joked. Her sharp gaze took in my ripped shirt, torn trousers, and general filthiness. "Excuse me?" "It's not important. I'd like admittance, please," I stammered, handing her one of my garlands. She just stared at the coin, and then at me, her eyes once again assessing each detail. Taking the garland as though it were a dead mouse, Mrs. Turbley asked, "Where did you get this boy?" "I've had enough of my father's antics to last me a while, and I'll be the son of a court jester if I return to my estate in Sparling. I don't give a devil's inch that he's the Duke," I recited. "Please, ma'am, there should be more than enough for you not to ask any more questions." Mrs. Turbley raised her dark eyebrows. Wait. Eyebrow. There was one. "The son of a noble. Coming here. To Kachar. To live among these hooligans." It wasn't a question, so I wasn't inclined to answer. "Here," I said, handing her the ribbons I had snagged from the fabric merchant. "To compliment the gold flecks in your eyes when you wear your hats." I flashed her what I hoped was a swoon-worthy grin. She seemed to be softening, so I used the moment to carry the empty basin the dirty water had been in into the kitchen. When I returned to the yard, she asked, "What should I call you then?" "Sage," I cautioned. Mrs. Turbley looked at the plant I had my eyes on. "You expect me to believe your noble father would name you after a common shrub?" "Actually, it means man of profound wisdom. It seemed my parents have a sense of humor after all. Who chooses their own name?" I shrugged. "Well, you certainly have the upbringings of a nobleman. I'll see if I can beat that attitude out of you yet," she huffed. "Come along." And while I had been in the threshold before, stepping into it again brought on a feeling of resolution in my life. No more family. No more country. A true orphan.